Hey guys, tonight we will drift upstream together on a slow, shimmering river, the kind that moves so gently you almost forget it is flowing at all. You are here in the dark with me, phone or laptop glowing like a tiny campfire, while the rest of your world keeps buzzing and insisting you answer just one more message. Your shoulders are tense, your brain is still scrolling through unfinished tasks, and you are pretty sure you probably won't survive this long without checking your notifications again. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you like, you can also drop your city and local time in the comments so we can see where this little river of a story drifts tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit low in the narrow canoe, hips close to the waterline, paddle resting across your knees as a translucent mist hangs over the river. The night is not completely dark. It has that bluish, softened glow that comes when the moon hides behind thin clouds. The water catches the faint light like folded silk, ripples spreading from every gentle movement you make. Far ahead, the river bends toward darker forest. You draw the paddle into the water and feel the first slow pull against the current. Going upstream is not dramatic at the beginning. It is simply heavier, as if the river politely reminds you that every meter you gain tonight will be paid for in small, steady efforts. Your shoulders roll, your back adjusts, your hands find the balanced grip on the wooden shaft that keeps your wrists from complaining too loudly. You have done this before. Your body remembers the motion even while your day-bright mind is still slowly switching off. On either side, the forest stands in layered silhouettes, trunks and branches leaning over the water like giants dozing on their feet. From the canopy, insects murmur in a soft, endless weave of sound, a living static that smooths the rough edges of your thoughts. The air is cool and damp against your skin, carrying the scent of river mud, wet bark, and distant wood smoke. The current still tries to carry you back the way you came, toward the downstream villages where lanterns are already dim and cooking fires have cooled to faint embers. But tonight your path goes the other way, back toward the upstream bend where the forest neighbors keep their fires a little later and their stories stretched out like long, unhurried shadows. The mist thickens as you move nearer, gathering in loose folds over the water so that your canoe seems to glide through clouds instead of river. You watch the bow part the mist into slow, drifting swirls that close again behind you, erasing the trail you have just made. It feels oddly comforting, this easy forgetting. Every few meters, the river rewrites itself, and the day behind you becomes as vague and distant as the line of shore. Your breaths come deeper now, pulling you more fully into the rhythm of the night. Small sounds grow clear, the drip of condensation from overhanging leaves, the occasional plop of something small slipping into the water, the soft brush of your paddle as it breaks the surface. You shift your weight to keep the canoe balanced, feeling the worn wooden seat beneath you and your knees braced lightly against the sides. You do not have to force yourself to relax. The river does the job for you simply by being relentlessly patient. You could try to rush, to dig quickly and powerfully at the water, but the current always answers in the same calm tone, asking you to match its pace rather than fight it. Up ahead, the first faint glow appears on the right bank, so soft that at first you could mistake it for a trick of your tired eyes. It swells and steadies as you draw closer, resolving into the pale gold of a small fire burning low near the water's edge. Above it, you see the darker shapes of figures moving slowly, tending embers, adjusting something on a makeshift rack. The scent of smoke grows richer, layered now with something sweet and earthy that makes your stomach remember how long it has been since your last proper meal. You angled the canoe toward the glow, letting the current push gently against your side as you cross the river's breadth. The mist thins near the shore, revealing roots that curl into the water, stones slicked with moss, and a low stretch of sand just wide enough to beach the bow. Your paddle slides into the shallows with a last soft stroke, and the hull nudges the earth with a quiet bump. The upstream bend waits. The night is still kind, and your forest neighbors are already awake, warming roasted plantains over coals that crackle lazily in the dark. Before you reach all the way into that glow on the bank, your body has already been quietly teaching itself the night river again. You sit in the canoe with that grounded, low-center feeling, knees slightly bent, ankles remembering where to press against the floor so the boat feels less like an object and more like an extension of you. The paddle dips in, blade first, and the river responds with that familiar, patient resistance, a kind of gentle argument that never raises its voice. You pull, and the canoe eases forward a little, the bow nudging the mist aside. You switch sides, slide the paddle in again, and the motion becomes a slow metronome. There is nothing fancy about it, nothing heroic or cinematic. It is the kind of repetition you could almost do half asleep, which, let's be honest, is basically your natural state by this point in the day. Each stroke is small, deliberate, and just strong enough to keep you moving against the current without turning this into a workout video. After a while, you notice how your body starts making micro adjustments on its own. Your shoulders stop tensing at your ears and drop into a more sustainable angle. Your elbows bend just enough to spare your joints. Your fingers loosen around the paddle so it rests more in the curve of your palms than in a tight, anxious grip. You are not trying to be efficient. You simply become efficient because anything else is too much effort. The forest listens to this change. Crickets keep their endless rhythm section going high in the undergrowth. Cicadas buzz in low, vibrating waves. And somewhere far off, an owl gives a single, questioning call that never expects an answer. You can hear water chuckling softly over a half-submerged log somewhere to your left. The sounds arrive in layers, not demanding your attention, but gently filling all the quiet spaces where your daytime worries usually sit. The current nudges you back whenever your strokes grow too lazy, but even that begins to feel like part of the rhythm. You pull, the river resists. You rest, the river gives you a tiny slide backwards as a friendly reminder that gravity is still in charge. It is like an invisible teacher who lets you cheat a little on your homework, but never entirely. You settle into a pattern of small rituals that make the night easier. Every 20 strokes, you pause just long enough to flex your fingers and roll your wrists in a slow circle, listening to the faint creak of tendons instead of the ping of notifications. Every few minutes, you shift your weight from one hip to the other, giving your lower back a chance to complain and then quiet down again. You take a careful sip from the bottle lying between your feet, the cool water tasting faintly of metal and plastic, and somehow still perfect. You keep an eye on the shoreline without really meaning to count the distance. The trees glide past like tall, dark passengers on an invisible conveyor belt. Sometimes roots reach down into the water like claws, but your canoe slips by untouched, as if the forest has already decided you are not worth tripping tonight. On other stretches, the bank drops low and sandy, and you glimpse shapes that might be small animal tracks leading down for a drink, washed soft and blurry by the river's slow breathing. With every meter you gain, your thoughts become less sharp, less crowded. the irritating little replays from the day, half-heard gossip, awkward comments, the thing you wish you had said in that meeting, lose their urgency, as if you are carrying them in a basket with holes in the bottom. The river gently shakes the basket, and pieces fall out into the dark water and drift away behind you. You barely notice when they vanish. The smell of wood smoke reaches you before the next bend, faint and fragmentary, stretching itself along the surface of the water. It mixes with the scent of wet leaves and river mud, becoming something both wild and homely. Beneath it, you catch a hint of sweetness and starch, something roasted and softened by heat, the kind of smell that makes your stomach quietly perk up even when you insisted earlier that you were not hungry. You keep paddling, letting that smell act as a kind of compass. The current seems slightly stronger here, as if reluctant to grant you this small comfort with one last test. Your strokes grow a little deeper, your core muscles doing more of the work, so your arms can slow down. The canoe responds with obedient, unhurried progress, nudging closer to the invisible source of warmth. Every now and then, a small patch of rougher water catches the bow and turns it a fraction of a degree off course. You correct automatically, nudging the paddle in as a gentle rudder, shifting your weight in an almost lazy sway. You do not think about technique. You simply let your body respond the way it has been quietly trained to do by repetition and necessity. This is the opposite of multitasking. This is single-tasking so thoroughly that even your muscles begin to yawn. As you approach the place where the glow on the bank will finally show itself, your pace naturally slows. You are not rushing toward it, you are drifting into it, keeping just enough force in each stroke to stay in charge while still letting the river carry part of the responsibility. The mist thins and thickens in patches, curling around your shoulders and face like a loose blanket. Beads of moisture gather on your eyelashes, softening the already blurred world into something almost painterly. You realize somewhere between one breath and the next that the rhythm you have found is not about speed or distance. It is simply about matching the scale of your effort to the softness of the night. You do not need to prove anything to the river, or to yourself, or to anyone watching, because no one is watching. It is just you, the current, and the faint promise of roasted plantains waiting in the glow ahead, turning hard exercise into a sleepy, upstream lullaby. The faint glow ahead finally resolves into something steady as you drift out of the bend. The mist thins, slipping away from the surface of the river like a curtain being drawn aside. A small strip of sand appears at the base of the trees, pale as a sleep-creased pillow edge. Above it, a low fire burns in a calm oval, no high flames, just a bed of breathing coals and a steady plume of smoke that climbs before it dissolves into the canopy. The sweet roasted smell grows stronger with every lazy push of your paddle. Your strokes slow without you deciding. The canoe glides in on its own stored momentum, the bow nudging the shallows with a soft, gritty drag. The current brushes past the hull, tugging once at the stern, then slips on when it feels you have chosen to stay. You plant the paddle in the mud for a heartbeat, anchoring the boat, and feel the ache in your shoulders and lower back bloom in full now that they are not busy pretending to be fine. It is a good ache, honest and earned, like the weight in your limbs after a long day that finally lets itself admit to being tired. The fire takes over from there. It crackles softly, a low, contented sound rather than a dramatic roar. Embers glow like a field of tiny suns buried just beneath the charcoal, brightening when a piece of wood settles, and sending up a small spray of orange sparks that rise and vanish. The light lays itself gently over the nearest tree trunks, picking out the texture of bark and leaving the spaces beyond in velvety darkness. You step closer and feel heat stroke your chilled hands and face, a slow, even warmth that seeps into you without demanding anything in return. Forest neighbors move in and out of the light with unhurried confidence. You recognize the easy way they share the narrow strip of sand, how they pass one another tools and bundles without looking, as if each person already knows where everyone else will step next. On a simple wooden rack above the coals, curved plantains rest like sleeping crescent moons. Their skins have darkened almost to black, splitting along their length. Each careful turn from practiced hands lets a soft sigh of steam escape, carrying that thick, sweet smell that has been calling you in from the river. A space opens for you near the warmth, not with ceremony, just by the circle stretching the way it always does for one more tired traveler. You step into it and feel the fire on one side of you and the cool open river on the other, like the two halves of your day arranged neatly at your shoulders. A leaf-wrapped bundle finds its way into your hands, warm and slightly damp where the steam has pressed through. The veins of the leaf catch the firelight for a moment, glowing delicate and green gold, before dimming again as you lower it toward your chest. You peel back the charred skin and leaf in slow strips. Beneath, the plantain is soft and glossy, the surface just beginning to brown where it leaned closest to the heat. The first bite is simple and steady, warm sweetness with a faint thread of smoke and earth, like sunshine stored and replayed in slow motion. It spreads down your throat and settles behind your sternum, lining the inside of your tired body with comfort. By the time you swallow the last piece, another warm bundle is already waiting in your other hand, offered so casually that it feels as natural as breathing. By the time you finish that second plantain, a different kind of heaviness has settled into your muscles. Not the sharp drag of effort, but the pleasant weight that comes after warmth and food and the decision, however temporary, not to push yourself any further than necessary. This first fire stop is not a destination. It is a tiny glowing comma in the long sentence of the river. Standing here between heat and water, fingers still sticky with sugar, you understand that your upstream journey tonight will be measured as much in these gentle pauses as in the distance you force against the current. When you finally step back toward the canoe, the river feels less like an opponent waiting in the dark and more like a patient companion, ready to resume the slow conversation you have been having since you first dipped your paddle in. Somewhere ahead, beyond the next curtain of mist and the next curve in the banks, other fires are already glowing, other plantains are slowly turning over their coals, and the night is quietly planning to carry you from one warm circle to the next, until effort and comfort blur into a single, sleepy rhythm. You hover for a moment between river and fire, fingers still faintly sticky with roasted plantain, before the evening gently changes shape. Instead of closing around the flames in your waiting canoe, the line of shoulders bends toward the trees. A lantern is lifted, a basket is picked up, and the slow current of movement flows inland. The invitation is small and wordless. The canoe can wait. The river will still be there, practicing patience. The gardens and quiet work of the forest only look like this tonight, so your feet follow. Sand yields to darker soil, cool and slightly springy under your bare soles. Roots knot across the path, You place each step with the same half-sleepy care you use when dodging furniture in the dark at home. Overhead, the canopy leans in, stitching a roof out of branches that hides most of the sky. The lantern's glow stretches ahead in an oval, painting nearby trunks in warm amber and leaving everything beyond in deep, breathable shadow. Insects drift through the light in loose spirals, tiny moving commas in the long, slow sentence of the forest. The first plantain trees appear as thickened darkness before resolving into shape. Their broad leaves rise on sturdy stalks, catching the lantern glow along their ribs. Where the light touches, the green looks almost polished. Where it fades, the leaves are just silhouettes, edges outlined against the slightly paler sky. Heavy bunches hang under some crowns, fruit clustered so tightly it seems each one is holding the next in place. Other trunks stand empty of fruit for now, having already given their harvest earlier in the year. Underfoot, the ground is surprisingly open. Undergrowth has been kept low, so every step is easy, rather than a wrestling match with thorny plants. Your forest neighbors move through the trees with unhurried precision. Hands reach up to test the weight of a bunch, fingers reading ripeness the way you might skim a page. A careful cut, a controlled swing, and a cluster settles into a basket without a bruise. On a woven mat, plantains are sorted, older ones nudged into one pile, younger ones into another. Tonight's fire in one direction, tomorrow's market in another. Nothing feels rushed. Time here is measured less by clocks and more by the quiet certainty that whatever doesn't get done now will simply slide into the next night. Breathing deep, you notice how different the air feels away from the water. It is thick with plant breath, cool earth, the faint bitter sweetness of crushed leaves. A soft dampness rests on your skin, broken now and then by a thin breath of wind sneaking in from the river corridor. What looked like wild forest from your canoe reveals itself up close as careful work. Fallen fronds are stacked where they can dry and later feed the soil. Narrow channels cut between beds guide water to the roots. A few small stones mark the edges of paths so wandering feet do not crush fragile shoots in the dark. The path rises gently to a small clearing above the gardens. Here another fire burns inside a circle of stones, flames low and steady. 3 lanterns hang from a simple wooden frame, turning the clearing into a roofless room. At its edges, the night's second shift is in progress. Long strips of fiber lie coiled on a bench, waiting to be twisted into rope. Half-finished baskets lean together, frames bare, gaps ready to be filled. A paddle rests across 2 stumps, its blade already smoothed, a new handle still being shaped. Nets hang from a line like ghostly curtains, some sections newly mended, knots bright against the older cord. Hands move through these tasks with the same quiet skill you saw in the garden. Fibers roll against thighs until they become cord. Basket frames accept new strips with a hushed, sliding sound. Nets are lifted, checked, and patched with practiced motions that no one has to think about anymore. There was no rush to finish everything tonight. The point is not completion, but continuity. The promise that tomorrow there will still be something to mend and prepare for the river. Standing in the lantern glow, you realize this is the other half of the current you paddle in. Day might be for loud bargaining at landings and paddles slapped down against choppy water. Night belongs to these small, almost invisible labors that keep everything from coming apart. Your part in this machinery is brief, but not nothing. You have paddled here, eaten the fruit grown in this soil, warmed yourself by a fire fed with this wood. For a while, your tiredness is folded into the long, patient work of the forest neighbors. When you finally turn back toward the path and the faint silver of the river beyond the trees, you carry more than just the memory of roasted plantain. You carry the quiet certainty that somewhere, always, on some other bank, another circle of light is turning night into something gently useful. The path back to the river feels shorter than it did coming up from the sand, as if the forest, satisfied that you have seen what it needed to show you, is gently escorting you out. Lantern light moves ahead of you like a tame star, touching trunks and leaves before gliding on. Beneath your feet, the packed earth gradually loosens into sand again, and the smell of damp soil thins into the familiar mix of water, mud, and wood smoke. The quiet work in the gardens and the clearing feels like it keeps going behind you, invisible hands still sorting plantains, twisting fiber, and mending nets long after you are gone. Your canoe waits where you left it, looking smaller and more fragile after the solid weight of the forest paths. The bow rests on the sand, as if it too has been leaning into the firelight, soaking up warmth before the next stretch of effort. You ease it back into the shallows with an economical push of your hips and knees, mindful of your energy now that the night has fully settled into its deeper phase. The hull slides into its familiar groove on the water, finding the thin line where floating is easiest. When you climb in, the river takes your weight with a soft, balanced sway. For a moment, you simply sit there, letting the slight rocking motion smooth out the creases in your thoughts. The bank glows behind you, the first fire now a small, well-behaved sun on the edge of the dark. Your forest neighbors fall into a quiet formation along the shore, some with lanterns, some with baskets tucked easily against their hips, feet already remembering where the path hugs the water and where it slips into the trees. It seems that the night has decided this next piece of upstream belongs to all of you together. You push off with the paddle and feel the familiar tug of the current trying to undo your progress. Stroke by stroke, you pull away from the little landing, the fire narrowing to an ember-sized memory behind you. On the bank, feet crunch softly through leaf litter and sand, always keeping pace with your slow advance. Sometimes you are ahead by a breadth of river. Sometimes the line of lanterns pulls slightly in front, tracing the next bend before you see it. The rhythm becomes a kind of shared breathing. Paddle dips, feet step, lantern swing, water glides. As you move on, the river starts to show you what it has been doing for longer than anyone currently awake can remember. Here, a section of bank slopes gently down, the sand darkened and smoothed in the places where canoes are pulled up again and again. You see the faint shine of worn roots and stone where hands reach without thinking, the exact spots that will not crumble or slip. A little further on, the trees pull back to make room for a broader patch of ground, where flat stones lie in patient arrangement, just the right height for sorting baskets, drying nets, or pretending you are not procrastinating while you chat and shell nuts. You recognize shallow scars in the earth where old channels once carried floodwater into temporary lagoons, now mostly filled in with silt and stubborn plants. In your mind's eye, you can almost see earlier seasons layered over the present one. Children splashing where dry fern now grows, rafts tied where shrubs are rooted, extra canoes wedged between trunks when the water rose higher than anyone had planned. The river has been a road long before someone decided to call it that, carving and recarving its own lanes and parking spaces as casually as you rearrange icons on a home screen. On nights like this, with the mist hanging low and the air thick with plant breath, the river also becomes a pantry. Overhanging branches offer fruit at careless arm's reach, some already half nibbled by bats and birds, others still perfect and untouched. You pass sandbanks etched with heron tracks and the wide, deliberate imprints of something heavier that came to drink in the deep hours. Driftwood piles itself in random but generous stacks, future fuel waiting for hands to claim it and turn it into more small fires, more roasted plantains, more reasons to pause. The surface of the water carries tiny clues, a faint swirl where fish gather, a smooth patch where the current slips around an invisible stone that hides crayfish or snails. To someone patient enough to watch, the river writes a grocery list every night. And then there are the places where it has been a gallery and scrapbook for generations. You glide past a stretch of bank where tree trunks lean at odd angles, the bark scarred with shallow cuts and carefully burnt marks. To untrained eyes they might look like random scrapes. With a little imagination, you see the pattern. Notches marking big floods, faint rings where old rope ladders used to hang, simple shapes that once helped children remember which months brought which fruits, which fish, which migratory birds. The lanterns on the bank illuminate them in brief flashes as you pass, turning each panel into a fragment of an old, flickering slideshow. Further along, a low rock shelf juts into the water, its edge worn smooth by decades of bare feet and heavy baskets. Tiny grooves crisscross the stone where knives have sharpened countless times, the rock itself slowly becoming a record of every net mended and every paddle shaped beside it. When the water was lower, someone carved simple patterns into a patch of exposed surface. Tonight, the river laps at the bottom of those marks, making them glisten like fresh ink. For a moment, you imagine someone standing in this exact spot many seasons ago, hands stained with sap and river mud, turning their day into lines on stone because that is what humans do when they want to remember. The forest neighbors on the bank do not need to point any of this out. Their steady pace, the way they sometimes pause by a particular bend or tree, the natural widening of the path where people have always gathered, all speak clearly enough. As you paddle, you realize that you are not just moving through space, but drifting across a layered collage of routines and memories. Every landing is a bookmark from some previous evening. Every scar on bark or stone is a caption without words. The river is not just a route you happen to be using tonight. It's a long, unbroken sentence written by everyone who has ever needed to travel, eat, work, or simply exist along its banks. Your canoe rides slightly higher now that the food and rest from the first fire have settled into your muscles. The paddle feels lighter, or maybe you are just paying less attention to the effort and more to the way the landscape keeps offering you these quiet, unasked-for explanations of itself. Upstream still waits, full of whatever small problems the night might yet decide to throw at you, but for now, you move inside this long, gentle story the river is telling, of floods and dry spells, of fires and plantains, of feet on stone and hands on wood, of the way water remembers everything without ever insisting you look too closely. Somewhere between one bend and the next, the air that has been quietly minding its own business all night decides it would like to be noticed. At first, it is just a slight change in temperature, a coolness slipping in under the edges of the warmth you carried from the fire and the roasted plantains. The breath on your skin feels less like river mist and more like something arriving from far away, as if a distant piece of sky has sent a careful scout downstream to check on things. You keep paddling, blade dipping in and out with the same slow rhythm, but your senses start collecting small, unrelated details and lining them up like clues. The insects in the canopy shift their soundtrack a notch lower. The constant high buzz softens into scattered calls, leaving more space between sounds. Leaves that have been resting all night begin to whisper against each other, the kind of soft rustling that has no clear source, just a general agreement that it is time to move. Above the tight roof of branches, the sky that you can glimpse in ragged triangles has thickened. Earlier, the night felt like a dark silk cloth stretched smoothly over the forest, moonlight seeping through in fine threads. Now the cloth seems to have doubled, layered cloud upon cloud, dulling whatever light the moon has left to offer. The stars, which once winked at you in small, reassuring clusters, have retreated behind that extra veil, leaving only a few brighter ones peering down like stubborn night owls who refuse to go to bed. Your paddle strokes sound different too. When the air grows heavy, every movement becomes more audible. The blade leaves the water with a sharper drip, the droplets hitting the surface with tiny, precise taps instead of invisible murmurs. When you switch hands, you hear the faint squeak of wood against damp skin. The hull creaks a little as your weight shifts. All the little sounds you have been making all night turn up their volume just enough for you to notice that the forest's own noise has stepped back a pace. On the bank, your forest neighbors feel it as well. Lanterns hang a little lower, closer to the ground and to the reassuring solidity of roots and stones. Baskets are cradled in arms instead of dangling casually from hands, as if everyone has quietly remembered that a sudden gust could turn a relaxed stroll into a comedy of flying plantains. The line along the shore tightens, people moving a little closer together, the gaps between them shrinking as if to make sure no one gets quietly edited out of the night by an unexpected squall. You know the river's moods well enough to recognize this one. It is not the dramatic, theatrical anger of a full storm yet. It is the building phase, the long inhale before the sky decides what kind of scene it wants to play out. The current under your canoe feels a little more purposeful, as if extra water is on the way and the river is making room in advance. Small ripples begin to chase each other across the surface, even when your paddle is still. Wind sketching invisible patterns that your boat glides over. This is where your quiet upstream adventure starts to carry the shape of a problem. Nothing urgent, nothing catastrophic, just a simple calculation. Rising wind, plus thickening clouds, plus you in a narrow canoe in the middle of the night, still some distance from the safety of home. You feel your mind stir in the way it does when it realizes a nap is over, and decisions, however gentle, must be made. How much further can you go before the rain arrives? Where the next sensible shelter might be? How much more energy you have left stored in your tired muscles and in the warmth of plantain sweetness still lining your stomach? You tilt your head back as far as the canopy allows and see the first clear sign. The tops of the tallest trees sway, not just in random breeze, but in organized waves, one patch bending, then the next, as if the wind is running its fingers along the ridge in a steady, testing comb. A few high leaves tear loose and spin down, flashing briefly in the lantern light before vanishing into the undergrowth. The smell of the air changes again, picking up a sharper edge, that mineral tang that always arrives a little before real rain, like a trailer for the main event. Instead of tightening into anxiety, your mind does something much more useful. It begins to adjust the lens through which it views the night. The river is no longer just a dreamy conveyor belt of mist and history. It becomes a corridor that must be navigated wisely. The forest is no longer only a backdrop of silhouettes. It is a network of possible shelters, raised platforms and sturdy trees that can host hammocks high above a swollen river if needed. The lanterns pacing you along the bank are no longer just pretty floating constellations. They are markers of people who know every safe landing, every solid route, every high patch of ground that will stay dry when the river decides to test its boundaries. You feel your grip on the paddle tighten for a moment, then deliberately loosen. There is no point in trying to race a storm that probably started forming while you were still finishing lunch. Your job is not to defeat the weather, it is to cooperate with it intelligently enough that you end up upstream, only damp and pleasantly exhausted rather than thoroughly miserable. Ahead, the river bends slightly, and beyond that, the faint shape of higher ground rises in the dark, where you know a longhouse on stilts waits like a patient wooden ark. The idea of that raised shelter becomes a quiet, steadying point in your mind. You picture its floor above the reach of splash and spray, its roof taking the brunt of the rain, while people inside share the simplest of tasks and the simplest of foods, yet again including plantains that seem to determine to follow you through the night. The potential storm does not erase the comfort of the journey so far. It simply outlines your next objective in a slightly thicker pen. With each stroke, you align yourself toward that invisible longhouse, letting memory and the lanterns on the bank guide you through the thickening dark. The sky above may be gathering itself into one long, loud sentence of thunder and rain, but for now you are still within the quieter clause that comes before it. The wind ruffles the surface of the water, tugs at your hair and clothes, and reminds you that even the softest nights keep a few tests tucked away for travelers who insist on paddling upstream. The first real gust rolls down the river like a slow push, and your canoe feels it before you do. The bow lifts a fraction higher, the hull trembles with a faint shiver, and the glassy surface you have been sliding over all night roughens into a patchwork of small, restless ripples. You brace your knees against the sides without thinking, the way you might grab a handrail in a bus just as it lurches forward. Over on the bank, lanterns swing in a wider arc, thin halos of light suddenly more dramatic against the dark wall of trees. The river that has been quietly accepting your upstream ambition now starts asking more pointed questions. Waves slap against the sides of the canoe with a little more intention. The paddle, which used to enter and leave the water like a spoon in soup, now meets a surface that pushes back with uneven enthusiasm. Your strokes shorten automatically, the blade going less deep but more often, keeping your center of balance low and your movements compact. This is not the time for graceful, cinematic sweeps. This is the time for practical, slightly stubborn paddling that cares more about staying upright than looking impressive. Your forest neighbors tighten their line along the shore, lanterns spaced more regularly now, as if someone has quietly switched the night into guidance mode. Each light becomes a marker. Here the bank is solid, there the roots are tricky, up ahead the current pinches across a hidden rock. You watch the pattern of lanterns the way a tired driver watches lane markings, letting their steady glow tell you where the safe water lies. Occasionally, one lantern rises higher, held aloft above a patch of river that needs extra attention. You angle your bow accordingly, feeling the canoe respond with a faint, relieved sigh through the wood. Wind threads its way through the canopy overhead, shaking loose a small rain of leaves and twigs that patter into the river like indifferent applause. The sound of insects fades further, replaced by the deeper, fuller noise of moving air and water negotiating who gets to be louder. Your clothes flap gently against your skin, heavy with moisture but not yet soaked. The smell in the air sharpens another notch, that metallic rain is imminent tang, now wrapped around the steady background notes of mud and plant sap. This would be an excellent moment for your brain to pull out its anxious highlight reel, images of capsizing, of losing your paddle, of drifting helplessly into some cinematic disaster. Instead, it gives you something else, the clear memory of the last roasted plantain you ate by the fire, the way its warmth seeped into your stomach and slowly radiated outward. Your muscles are still drawing on that little reservoir of sugar and comfort as you lean into each stroke. Fear tries to raise a hand. Fatigue politely tells it to take a seat. You are too tired to panic properly, which, surprisingly, works in your favor. The river's surface, lit by swinging lanterns and blurred moonlight, becomes a moving mosaic of dark and dull silver, patches of shadow stitched together by quick flashes where waves catch the light. Your paddle cuts through these shifting tiles, sending little sprays of drops that glint briefly before vanishing. Every now and then, a larger swell picks up the bow and tilts it, your stomach doing that small roller coaster dip before you instinctively shift your weight and bring everything back into line. Behind you, the wake scribbles an uneven signature that the wind immediately edits away. At a narrow kink in the river, one lantern on the bank shines brighter, closer to the waterline. The ground dips there, making a small sheltered notch where the wind's grip is weaker. You angle the canoe in, feeling the current ease for a moment as the bank curves protectively around you. The hull nudges against a buried root, and you plant the paddle to hold yourself in place. From somewhere just beyond the reach of the light, the smell hits you again. Roasted plantains, that same simple sweetness, now mixed with the richer scent of smoke whipped low by the wind. You edge the canoe close enough that your fingers can curl around a gnarled root, the bark rough and reassuring under your damp skin. A small bundle wrapped in leaf finds its way to you, warm and slightly greasy where steam has softened the fibers. In this little pocket of calmer air, you balance the canoe with your knees and open the bundle. The plantain inside is soft and steaming, its skin charred, its flesh turned into something halfway between bread and memory. Each careful bite sends a new wave of warmth through you. Not dramatic, just steady, like topping up a dwindling battery. You do not linger long. Upstream still waits, and the longhouse on stilts that lives in your mind as a promise of shelter is not going to paddle closer by itself. You tuck the last sweet bite into your mouth, tighten your grip on the paddle, and ease the canoe back into the main current. The notch in the bank slides behind you, its temporary protection traded for the wider, wind-touched river once more. Your forest neighbors adjust with you, lanterns falling back into that zigzag pattern along the shore that has become your floating constellation. The gusts grow more confident now, carving visible paths on the water. Waves slap higher up the hull, sending occasional sprays that dot your arms and face with cool pinpricks. One sharper cross-current catches the bow and shoves it sideways toward a dark hump that could be a submerged log or simply an overconfident clump of plants. Your body reacts faster than your thoughts, dropping your center, planting the paddle on the far side, and levering the canoe back on course with a short, firm pull. Your heart knocks politely on your ribs a few extra times, then settles back into its slower beat. Adrenaline isn't exactly ideal for bedtime, but in small doses, it does make you feel impressively awake for someone who should clearly be horizontal by now. On the bank, lanterns dip and rise as your neighbors navigate their own version of this windy stretch. Feet find roots and stones that lie exactly where they always have been. Shoulders lean into gusts at the right angles. Even when the light swings wildly, it never goes out. That persistent glow becomes its own kind of lullaby, not soft and sleepy, but calm and competent. The reassurance of people who have walked this river's edge through more storms than you have had birthdays. Ahead, the line of trees breaks slightly, and the outline of darker stone shoulders into view where the bank has worn away to reveal a rocky outcrop. Even from this distance, in this light, you can sense that the river narrows and deepens there, its voice changing pitch as it slides past the solid flank. The lanterns on shore angle towards it, your bow follows. The storm is still rehearsing above you, clouds and wind busy with their preparations, but the river keeps offering you landmarks, and the steady company of neighbors with roasted plantains and unhurried feet. You pull your paddle through the roughened water, feeling your boat answer with obedient, if slightly grumpy, forward motion. Lanterns sway, trees lean. The rocky shape ahead grows clearer, waiting to show you what has been carved into its face by hands and seasons, even as the sky finally starts to decide what kind of storm it wants to be. The rocky shoulder of the bank grows taller as you approach, its base black against the restless water, its upper slopes washed in shifting gray, where lanterns on shore throw light and shadow over every crack. The narrowed river deepens in voice here, the surface pulled kite and swift as it funnels past the stone. Waves slap the rock with quick, impatient hands, then slide away in sheets that catch the lantern glow in brief, broken flashes, while the wind hums through the exposed branches above. You slip the canoe into a calmer eddy beside the outcrop, where the current folds back on itself in slow spirals. The bow steadies, and for a moment you are parked beside the stone as if at a quiet roadside stop, the main stream rushing past just out of reach. With the paddle resting across your knees, the outcrop stops being background scenery and becomes something else, a solid, patient witness that has been watching this bend for longer than anyone currently awake can remember. Lanterns gather along a narrow ledge above you, their glow spilling down the rock face in uneven bands. As your eyes adjust, you realize the stone is not smooth at all. Lines crisscross its surface in deliberate patterns, some shallow and pale, others worn almost flat, like memories half erased by time. The moving light makes them seem to shift and breathe, so that a simple curve becomes a river bend from one angle and a coiled serpent of current from another. You ease closer until the hull scrapes softly against the rock, the sound dull and reassuring. One hand leaves the paddle to rest against the cool surface, fingers sliding along the grooves. The stone is damp but firm, its chill a direct message from deeper layers untouched by the sticky night. Under your fingertips, the carved lines feel narrow and controlled, as if the hands that made them had plenty of evenings like this one and no particular reason to rush. In the lantern glow, you begin to pick out familiar shapes. A long arc mirrors the real channel just below you. Short cross marks lie where the current pinches, where nets catch better, or paddles have to dig deeper. Tiny triangles cling to one curve like little camp symbols, maybe memories of fires on sandbanks that have shifted, sunk, or slid away downstream. Lower down, circles overlap like bubbles frozen in mid-rise, some with notches inside them that might mean high water, harvest months, good fishing weeks, or visits from relatives riding the flood. The stone does not bother to label anything. There are no tidy captions, yet the intent feels clear in your hands. This is a river compressed into marks, its moods, its timings, its useful secrets. People once stood where you are, trying to pin a moving, unreliable world into something they could trace with a finger, comparing what the water was doing tonight with what the rock said it had done in other years. Screens glitch, paper mildews, but this patient surface just keeps storing scratches. A gust of wind throws cool spray up from the channel, speckling your arms and the rock with tiny droplets. Lanterns sway, their halos stretching and shrinking across the carvings, making the lines seem to ripple and flow. For a moment, the whole face of the outcrop looks like a slow-living mural, the river telling stories about itself, using nothing but light and stone. Pressed close to it in your narrow canoe, you feel smaller than you have all night, and unusually calm, as if your private worries have been quietly downranked in the grand scheme of things. Behind you, the channel keeps rehearsing for the storm. The current pulls harder, testing its banks, carrying leaves and strayed twigs past in spinning eddies. The forest along the shore leans inward a fraction, branches gesturing that it might be time to move on soon. Up on the ledge, your forest neighbors stand in a loose line with their lanterns held just far enough from the stone that the heat will not crack it, close enough that every groove can drink in the glow. You trail your fingers along one deeper groove that angles upward before curving back toward the water, like a miniature canoe route carved for invisible travelers. There is comfort in knowing that someone decided this bend was worth recording long before you ever had a tired back and a flimsy boat on it. Whatever weather the sky is building above you now is one more small verse in a very long song. Water, rock, plants, neighbors, storms, roasted plantains, sleep. With that thought lodged firmly but gently in your mind, you push away from the rock, feel the canoe drift back into the eddy, and turn your bow once more toward the tightening channel and the waiting longhouse upstream. Leaving the carved rock behind, you slip back into the main current, and the river wastes no time reminding you that it has been quietly leveling up while you were admiring stone scribbles. The water feels denser now, like a muscle flexing under the surface. Your first few strokes meet more resistance than you expect, the bow pushing into short, overlapping waves instead of the lazy ripples you enjoyed earlier. The sky, now thoroughly carpeted in heavy cloud, hangs low enough that it feels like the forest has put a lid on the night. The wind has finished hinting and moved on to statements. It rushes down the corridor of the river in uneven bursts, scooping up mist and flinging it sideways. Your clothes cling to your skin in a damp, resigned kind of way, as if they too realize there is no point staying crisp anymore. Lanterns along the bank swing wider, their halos stretching and compressing like slow heartbeats. Your forest neighbors hunch their shoulders a little against the gusts, but keep pace, feet finding familiar grip even as leaves tumble around them in restless spirals. The first raindrops arrive as scouts, big and widely spaced, each one landing with a distinct plop that you can feel as well as hear. They hit your forearms, your face, the worn wood of the canoe, leaving dark circles that bloom and vanish as more droplets join them. Within a minute, the pattern tightens. Soft taps multiply into a steady patter, then build into a fine, determined drumming that quickly soaks whatever illusion of dryness you had been clinging to. Mist blends with rain until the air becomes something you move through as much as breathe. It is tempting in a moment like this to declare that the night has turned against you, but sitting low in the canoe, feeling the river lift and settle under you like a restless animal, you know that nothing personal is happening. The water is just doing what water does. The sky is just following through on a promise it started making several bends ago. Your role here is much smaller and much clearer. Keep the boat pointed upstream, keep moving toward the memory of that longhouse on stilts, and try not to lean too dramatically into self-pity. The world narrows to a shorter tunnel of vision. Beyond a certain distance, everything dissolves into wet gray. The bank is less a solid line and more a suggestion made of darker shapes. Lanterns become crucial now. Each one is a tiny, defiant sun, its flame protected by glass, burning clean and steady despite the wind and rain. They bob along the shore like patient beacons, outlining a safe path where trees lean out and roots stay mostly under control. You steer by them, trusting that the people carrying them have long since figured out how to walk this edge without ending up face first in the river. The longhouse announces itself slowly, through hints before form. First, you notice that the lanterns begin to cluster more closely together on the right bank, their pattern tightening as if the path is about to do something important. Then the silhouettes grow more complex, not just trunks and branches, but vertical posts and neat angles that do not belong to trees. The smell of smoke shifts again, picking up a richer, drier note that suggests a roof catching the impact of rain. Above the steady drum of water on water, you hear a new sound, rain hammering on planks, muted by layers of palm thatch. A slightly raised landing reveals itself as the rain-blurred air thins for a breath. From the river, you see sloping logs and steps leading up to a broad platform, all resting on thick stilts sunk deep into the bank and riverbed. The longhouse stretches back into the trees, a dark, elongated shape whose underbelly is open to the water. You can glimpse the space beneath the floor where the river slides through in a low, shadowed corridor, its surface broken into jagged reflections of posts and ripples of light from above. You angle the canoe into the lee of the structure, where the stilts break the force of the current and the wind loses some of its enthusiasm. The difference is immediate. Waves drop half their height, slapping the hull with less insistence. The air still rains on you from above, but the water below feels less determined to rearrange your evening plans. A pair of sturdy poles extend from the landing, perfectly positioned for a tired traveler to grab. Your hands close around wet wood, fingers locking into grooves worn by countless other paddlers who arrived here under less than ideal weather conditions. Pulling yourself along the poles, you ease the canoe into a snug corner under the house, where the current becomes a soft, insistent tug rather than a full-body shove. You loop the painter line around a stilt, knotting it with fingers that remember the motion while the rest of you is halfway to sleep. The roof above amplifies the rain into a continuous roar, but here, close to the stilts, it becomes more background than threat, like white noise on a sleep app set accidentally to monsoon. When you climb the sloping steps up to the main platform, every inch of you acknowledges the change. The floor under your feet is dry, firm, and slightly warm from the bodies that have been moving across it. The air is still humid, but no longer slapping you in the face with every gust. The sound of rainfall on the roof turns into a steady and closing blanket of noise, making everything inside feel oddly private, as if the outside world had been put on hold. Your clothes drip politely onto the planks, adding their own tiny percussion to the orchestra overhead. Inside, if you can call a roof on stilts inside, life has already shifted into storm mode. Cooking pots sit safely away from the edges where stray spray might creep in. Hammocks hang in gentle arcs, some already occupied by bundled shapes who decided to take the hint and start their sleep early. Neat rows of baskets rest against posts, plantains piled in them like curved yellow moons, waiting for their turn with the fire. A small hearth in the center sends up a modest column of smoke that slips through a gap in the roof, carrying with it yet again that sweet, familiar scent of something roasting that has become the unofficial soundtrack of your night. You fall into the rhythm of simple chores almost automatically. Wet clothes are wrung out and spread where stray drafts can coax them toward something resembling dryness. Paddles are leaned to one side, blades wiped down so they won't warp. Ropes are coiled and checked, knots retied, fraying ends noted for future repair. You help where you can, fingers clumsy but willing. Your tiredness folded into a larger pattern of shared effort that has nothing to prove and nowhere urgent to be. A roasted plantain finds its way into your hands again, warm and fragrant, wrapped in leaf to keep your fingers from burning. You eat it slowly, each bite a small, steadying anchor against the storm thundering overhead. The sweetness is familiar now, a theme running through the night. At fireside, on the windswept bank, in this elevated shelter above a swollen river. With every mouthful, your body quietly recharges. Muscles soaking up fuel they will turn into upstream strokes later when the rain has exhausted its need to be dramatic. From the open sides of the longhouse, you watch the river below swell and darken. The surface, patchy with reflected lamplight, hurries along under the stilts, carrying leaves, twigs, and the occasional larger branch on its restless back. The storm owns the world beyond the roof for now. But up here, in the dry hum of simple tasks and the soft burn of roasted plantains, you are safe, held in a pocket of calm built on posts and long practice. The journey upstream has not been canceled. It has just been temporarily moved to higher ground, where you can wait out this loud paragraph of weather before slipping quietly back into the river's long, unhurried sentence. The storm eventually runs out of energy. The hammering on the roof thins to a patter, then to scattered drips, then to a faraway growl beyond the trees. In a borrowed hammock at the longhouse edge, you float in a soft cloth cradle and feel that shift, the way a half-asleep mind notices when a fan is switched off. The big noise is gone. What's left is a rinsed, slightly stunned quiet wrapped around the steady breath of the river below. You open your eyes to that sound, a deep, even rush of swollen water sliding past the stilts. It no longer tries to reach you, it owns everything underneath, while you occupy the dry strip of world above. The air has cooled, turning your damp clothes from sticky to almost refreshing. Each breath tastes of wet wood and clean soil, with a faint metallic edge that rain always leaves behind, like a discreet signature on the night. You swing your feet over the side of the hammock and let them hover for a moment. Muscles that clenched during the loudest bursts now feel pleasantly heavy, as if someone has turned down their volume. Around you, the longhouse has slipped into recovery. A few hammocks still cradle bundled shapes, others sag empty. In the center, the hearth sends up a thin ribbon of smoke, the fire coaxed back from embers to a small, polite flame that promises heat but no drama. On a grate above it, plantains wait again, because of course they do. Curved shapes blister and darken, skins going glossy, scent thickening the air with warm sweetness and smoke. A leaf-wrapped portion reaches your hands, heat soaking into your fingers as if you are holding a pocket of sunlight. You eat slowly, soft fruit and faint char filling the quiet between heartbeats, topping up the tired muscles that will have to face the river one more time before dawn fully settles into morning. Down at the water, the change is clear. The river has widened and filled, its surface sliding with quiet urgency, but the sharp edge has gone. It moves like a runner, easing through a cool-down lap. The sky is still heavy with cloud, yet the edges have started to fray, letting in slivers of paler gray. Mist clings to the banks, pooling around roots and trunks, so that the forest seems to be breathing out long, slow ghosts that barely rise above knee-height. Your canoe waits in its nook under the house, painter line tugging and relaxing with the river's new rhythm. Drops still fall from the beams, dotting the surface with brief rings, but the wild, wind-cut chop has flattened into something you can bargain with. You untie the rope, feel the damp fibers drag past your skin, and step down into the familiar hollow. The hull sways once and then settles as if recognizing you after the noisy interruption and deciding you are still worth carrying. Pushing off, you let the canoe drift for a few breaths before working the paddle. The first strokes feel heavier, not because the river is angry, but because your body remembers every earlier effort. Even so, there is a new clarity. You are no longer moving into a question. You are traveling through its answer. The longhouse shrinks behind you into a dark, comforting line, while the sky ahead lightens almost in spite of itself. Along the banks, insects soften their chorus to make room for cautious bird calls and the steady drip of water from every leaf. Your forest neighbors are still there, shapes moving along the shore, though many lanterns have been blown out or turned low. The few that remain glow out of habit rather than necessity, small pockets of gold in the washed palette of the after-storm world. The river, swollen and smoothed, quietly does you a favor. Rocks now lie deeper, teeth padded by extra water. Each paddled stroke meets a thicker, more even surface, and the canoe glides with less argument. Up ahead, the remaining bends no longer look like problems, but like gentle turns on a last cooling stretch, carrying you toward a jetty that is starting to feel closer than your tired mind expected. The forest lifts its freshly washed crown toward a sky that, at last, seems ready to soften. The river, in its after-storm mood, behaves like someone who has finished a long rant and now just wants a slow walk to cool off. It moves with purpose, but no sharp edges, broad-shouldered and smooth, sliding past the banks in one long, low murmur. Your canoe rides a little higher on this deeper water, and each stroke of the paddle feels thick and soft, as if you are cutting through folded silk. You have already been rattled by wind, deafened by roof-drumming rain, fed in a longhouse on stilts, and comforted by more roasted plantains than you would usually confess. Now the journey upstream leans gently toward its softer half. Naturally, the river has no intention of letting you reach home without adding a few extra notes to the story. Not disasters, those would be far too dramatic for this sleepy hour, but small, polite inconveniences that future you can exaggerate later when you need good material. The first sits innocently near your feet, a neat, leaf-wrapped bundle tucked against a rib, radiating the quiet confidence of something that believes it is secure. During the shuffle under the longhouse, someone slid it into the canoe, a packet of plantains and dried herbs meant for a house further upstream. In the sheltered nook under the stilts, it seemed perfectly stable. Out here, with the current still firm and the canoe shifting just a little more than before, that confidence begins to look naive. A sideways swell rolls under the hull, not even particularly dramatic, and the bundle starts a slow, treacherous slide toward the low side. You lunge for it, fingers stretching, but tired muscles and slick wood make a surprisingly effective team. Your fingertips graze the damp leaf just as the canoe tilts again, and the whole packet flips over the gunwale with a quiet, smug plop. For a few seconds, it bobs beside you, completely reachable, like an over-prepared snack that has decided to change careers. Then the current makes its ruling, catches the bundle, and carries it away at a pleasingly effortless angle, while you, already pointed upstream, are in absolutely no position to give chase. You briefly imagine spinning the canoe, sprinting downstream, scooping the bundle up in some heroic scooping maneuver. Then your shoulders, your lower back, and the practical corner of your mind hold a silent vote. The river is moving briskly. You are paddling against it. The bundle is floating downstream with the smug ease of someone who chose the escalator instead of the stairs. The outcome is obvious. You let out the smallest, rueful sigh and let the bundle go. Somewhere downstream, a fish or shoreline creature will enjoy a fancy breakfast with zero understanding of how lucky it is. On the bank, one of your forest neighbors watches the packet drift past, then makes the tiniest tilt of posture, the universal gesture for accepting that the river occasionally taxes everyone in snacks. The second inconvenience arrives under the surface. You have just settled back into your rhythm, paddle dipping and lifting in a slow, sleepy metronome, when the blade suddenly refuses to move cleanly. There is a sharp, unexpected drag. The shaft jerks in your hands. The bow slews off line with way more enthusiasm than you asked for. Beneath the opaque, rain-thickened water, some wandering vine or root has looped itself around the blade, the current pulling it one way while your arms pull another. For a few uneasy seconds, the paddle becomes an unwilling referee. You could yank and fight, turning this into an unplanned slapstick performance with a strong chance of you falling in. Instead, you remember what the night has been quietly teaching you since you first pushed away from the bank. The river behaves better when you stop treating it like an opponent. You loosen your grip, let the paddle sink a little, and turn it with the flow instead of against it. The tension in the shaft fades. The vine loses interest. It slides off, rising briefly in a sulky loop before drifting away into someone else's future minor problem. The canoe steadies. Your stomach does one last roller coaster dip, then settles. On shore, a lantern pauses for a heartbeat, as if checking that you are still vertical, and then resumes its calm, measured pace. The third trouble looks almost charming when you first notice it. A fat log drifting downstream along the far bank, riding the raised river like a dignified guest leaving the party early. It ambles parallel to you for a while, and you watch it with the same lazy curiosity you would give a slow-moving cloud. Then the current makes another quiet decision, and the log begins to angle toward midstream, turning itself very slowly into your exact lane. It's like watching a huge waterlogged gate pivot across your path, politely but firmly refusing to acknowledge your existence. Changing course costs energy you would prefer to spend on staying awake, but gliding gently into a traveling tree is not on your bedtime wish list. You plant the paddle on one side, then the other, coaxing the bow into a new line. The log keeps drifting closer, bark dark and slick, little branches still clinging like stubborn thoughts that refuse to drop off. For a moment it looks as if you have misjudged and are headed directly for its broad flank. Then the bank quietly steps in. One of your forest neighbors moves down to the water's edge, boots splashing in the shallows. A long pole, clearly kept ready specifically for this kind of conversation with traveling debris, leans out over the current. With a single, well-timed push, the pole nudges the far side of the log, and the river eagerly takes the hint, grabbing hold and swinging the big piece of wood away. The log pivots like a slow door opening, and a narrow gap appears, just wide enough for your canoe. You slip through with inches to spare, feeling the faint, impressive whoosh of something heavy passing not very far behind your shoulder. By the time you have cleared the log, the whole episode is already shrinking from potential crisis to mildly interesting river trivia. Your path straightens again, the paddle falls back into its comfortable rhythm, and the river continues its deep after-storm monologue, as if nothing at all just happened. Along the banks, the forest resumes its quieter errands. Birds shaking water from their feathers, droplets ticking from leaf tip to puddle, a branch somewhere settling with a soft crack. Watching the log recede behind you, you realize the night has really not been testing you. It has been demonstrating something gentler. Small troubles still arrive, but they do not stay yours alone. A lost bundle turns into breakfast for another creature. A snagged paddle frees itself when you stop trying to win and start cooperating. A drifting obstacle moves aside under the calm, practiced hands pacing you along the shore. Your upstream progress is still yours to make, stroke by stroke, but it no longer feels like a lonely struggle scratching along the dark. You are cushioned on all sides by quiet help. Carved rock that remembers old seasons, longhouses on stilts ready for louder storms, neighbors with lanterns and poles, and what appears to be an endless willingness to share roasted plantains. Ahead, the river's voice drops one more shade lower as it recognizes the subtle contour of your homestretch. The banks draw a little closer. The canopy knits itself more tightly overhead, and the mist thins from walls into gentle strips. Somewhere not far ahead, in that soft gray distance, your upstream jetty waits like a familiar punctuation mark at the end of a very long, very sleepy sentence. The bend unwinds slowly ahead of you, and the river begins to sound familiar in that deep, instinctive way that has nothing to do with maps. The banks draw a little closer and lean in with the casual intimacy of old acquaintances. The canopy arches over you in a higher, more continuous vault, the trunks on each side arranged in patterns you cannot quite name, but recognize in your bones. Even in this washed-out, after-storm half-light, you know you are entering the stretch that belongs to home. The sky has shifted while you are busy not colliding with logs and rescuing your paddle from ambitious vines. What was thick, featureless gray now holds the faintest suggestion of gradient. Toward the east, behind the forest, the darkness thins to a cool blue that has not yet decided whether it wants to be morning. A few stubborn stars still burn through the brighter patches, but they look more like memories than current events. The mist, once heavy curtains over the water, has sunk to knee height, pooling along the banks and drifting in thin, torn ribbons that your canoe cuts through like a slow blade. Birds wake in cautious installments, one thin call here, another there, each testing the air to see if the storm is truly done sulking. Leaves shake the last of the rain from their edges, sending occasional showers of droplets that patter into puddles below. The river, still wide and full, has lost the last of its temper. It hums along in one long, even tone, content just to move weight from upriver to down without added commentary. Against this soft backdrop, each dip of your paddle is a deliberate punctuation mark, a small repeating declaration that you are, in fact, still going. Up ahead, a shape separates itself from the ordinary tangle of roots and trunks, the faint, right-angled geometry of your upstream jetty. It is nothing extravagant, just a set of posts driven deep into the bank, a modest platform of planks, and a short flight of steps rising to the path that leads inland. Yet seeing it now feels like spotting a familiar face in a crowd after a long day. The outline is softened by lingering mist, the posts wearing a thin skin of moss and river stain, but every angle is known. The jetty has been taking note of arrivals and departures longer than you have been paddling, and tonight it seems perfectly content to clock one more. Your strokes, which have been dutiful rather than ambitious for the past stretch, gather one last thread of intention. You do not suddenly sprint, that would be rude to your knees, but there is a small, undeniable lift in your effort. The bow responds with quiet enthusiasm, sliding over the thick water with slightly more eagerness. Behind you, the carved rock, the storm-long house, the drifting log, and the lost plantain bundle all compress into background chapters. Ahead, the jetty widens from silhouette to structure. The wood grain and gaps between planks resolve as the canoe glides closer. Along the bank, your forest neighbors instinctively adjust their course. The line of figures and dimmed lanterns bends toward the landing, not in a dramatic parade, but with the same simple practicality they have applied to everything tonight. Feet find their favorite spots on the damp earth. A pair of hands grips a post in a way that says they have done this 3,000 times already. As your canoe noses into the shallows, a quiet pocket of stillness forms around the jetty, the current slipping away to either side as if giving you room to finish properly. The hull bumps the lowest step with a soft, hollow knock, and you plant the paddle one last time to hold yourself steady. Hands, yours, theirs, it hardly matters, catch the bow and ease the canoe alongside the platform. The wood under your palm feels solid and faintly warm, despite the night, a reassuring contrast to the cool, shifting water below. You swing one leg onto the jetty, then the other, pausing for a moment as your balance relearns what it means to stand on something that does not move with every breath. Your muscles protest, then admit defeat and fall into line. A small leaf-wrapped bundle appears near your hand, because apparently the river has decided your entire night should be bookmarked with roasted plantains. This one is modest, not the generous package that floated away to become some lucky fish's brunch, but a final, tidy portion. The skin inside is dark and split, the flesh is soft, browned in places, and still steaming slightly in the cool air. You eat it standing on the jetty, bare feet on damp wood, the river licking quietly at the posts below. Each bite is familiar and new at the same time, the same sweet starch, the same faint char, now layered with the memory of storm noise on a longhouse roof and carvings glowing on damp rock. Your forest neighbors share this last pause with you. Lanterns, mostly turned low now, hover at the edge of the jetty and along the bank, small halos in the thinning mist. Their bodies carry that unmistakable, end-of-task looseness. The way shoulders drop once a thing is properly finished, the way weight shifts more experimentally, ready to slip back into other patterns. No words are needed. If they were, the rushing river and the slow waking of birds would probably swallow them anyway. Instead, farewell happens in shoes shuffled against wood, in the slight tilt of lanterns, in the unhurried stillness that stretches between breaths. One by one, the lanterns turn away from the water. Shapes fold into the trees, following paths you can almost trace in your mind now, back to gardens where plantain stalks stand rinsed and straight, back to clearings where rope and baskets wait for the next round of mending, back to longhouses that smell of smoke, woven mats, and the whisper of rain remembered on palm thatch. The forest, so generous with its companions all night, slowly gathers them back into its own dark, leaving the jetty to you and the river's soft monologue. You stand there a little longer, letting the cool air wick heat from your skin, listening to the way water brushes the posts and sighs against the bank. The first real streaks of gray-blue morning stretch along the horizon behind the trees, tugging edges of shadow into clearer shapes. Your canoe rests obediently at the landing, tied with an easy knot that feels like more of a suggestion than a command. Your body is tired in every useful way, heavy and satisfyingly used, like a book whose pages have finally all been turned. When you finally turn your back on the river and climb the short steps toward home, you carry the night with you in layered fragments, the mist lifting as you paddled against the current, the warm glow of the first fire, the careful lines in stone, the roar of rain on a high roof, the gentle tug of small problems, and the easy relief of shared solutions. Behind you, the jetty resumes its quiet watch over arrivals and departures. Ahead, a hammock waits somewhere in the dim interior, ready to hold you above the lingering breath of the river, while your mind drifts back along the long, slow, upstream journey it has just lived through. Inside, the world is mostly shapes and edges softened by the last of the night. The walls are simple, the roof low, the floor carrying that faint, familiar creak that belongs to boards which have held generations of tired feet. You follow the narrow corridor of dimness until it opens onto the small veranda that hangs just above the slope of the bank. Out here, the air is cooler, the sky more visible, and the river's voice comes up in a soft, steady wash. Your hammock waits where it always does, slung between two sturdy posts, the cloth sagging in a lazy curve. Beneath it, through the gaps in the floorboards, you can see thin strips of water moving, gray and reflective, breathing against the earth. The jetty lies slightly downstream, a modest set of lines half lost in the mist, already sliding into the background of your awareness now that you are safely past it. You lower yourself into the hammock with the kind of exaggerated care your body insists on when it has finally reached the moment it has been quietly begging for. Fabric cradles you, stretching and then settling, wrapping your weight in a gentle, supportive swing. The cloth is cool at first against your damp back, then quickly warms, matching you like a patient second skin. You nudge the edge with one heel, and the whole world seems to begin a tiny, repeating arc, forward, back, forward, back. From this angle, the river looks less like a road and more like a long, unwinding ribbon of lightless silk. The mist that once swallowed entire bends now drifts in low, delicate bands, clinging to the surface as if reluctant to leave. The sky above has faded from thick storm gray to something softer, streaked with the first thin hints of blue. You can't see the sun yet, but you can feel its future in the way the darkness has stopped deepening and started to thin at the edges. Sounds rise in layers. Closest is the fabric's faint whisper as it adjusts around your shoulders and hips, that quiet rustle that might as well be the hammock's contented sigh. Beneath it, your breathing settles into a slower, more honest rhythm, no longer trying to pretend it is ready for anything strenuous. Just beyond that, the river murmurs, a continuous hush with tiny, irregular pockets where a wave bumps a stone or a stray branch taps against the bank. Further out still, birds test their morning songs in half-hearted phrases, as if they too need a warm-up. Your mind does what minds love to do at the edge of sleep. It replays. But instead of leaning on the sharp, embarrassing fragments of the day, it drifts back along the river you have just traveled. The memories arrive not as crisp scenes, but as softened, overlapping impressions. You see mist parting around the bow of your canoe, firelight licking up the trunks at the first landing, plantains splitting their skins to reveal soft, steaming sweetness beneath. You feel again the packed earth of the forest garden under your feet, the smooth pull of fibers turning into rope, the satisfying weight of a half-finished paddle in your hands. The carved rock returns in brief flashes of lantern glow, its lines flowing under your fingertips like an ancient stone version of the river running below your hammock. The storm longhouse rises around you once more, roof roaring with rain, stilts anchoring it above the dark, restless water, the smell of smoke and roasted fruit folding the noise into something survivable. Even the small problems come back, but they have lost their teeth. The lost plantain bundle drifting away now looks almost comical, a stubborn snack choosing its own adventure. The snagged paddle becomes a small, graceful lesson in cooperation rather than a crisis. The drifting log that swung across your lane shrinks to a story about timing and a well-placed pole on the bank. Each incident feels smoothed by distance, as if the river itself has sanded down the corners and left only rounded shapes you can turn over in your thoughts without flinching. All of these fragments, mist, fire, gardens, carvings, storm, longhouse, snacks sacrificed to the current, begin to blend into a single, long, upstream memory. It stretches from the moment you first dipped your paddle into the soft, dark water to this exact moment, wrapped in a hammock above the same river, now slowed and calmed. The details blur at the edges, colors washing into one another, sounds collapsing into a single steady hush. It is less a sequence of events and more a feeling of being carried and challenged, of being tired in a good way, of being gently surrounded by neighbors, trees, and water that know how to be both unpredictable and kind. You lie there while that memory slowly loses its outlines. Thoughts loop more slowly, sentences trail off halfway through, images drift apart and float away. The last thing that really settles in is not the carved rock or the roaring roof or the last sweet bite of roasted plantain. It is the simple, quiet fact that you made it upstream, against the current, through wind and rain and minor mishaps, with help on the banks and safe roofs above, and that now, for this stretch of time that belongs only to you, there is nothing left to do but rest. The river keeps moving under you. The forest keeps breathing around you. Your hammock keeps swinging in its small, careful arc. Somewhere behind your closed eyes, a final lantern is gently turned down, and the long, misty journey dissolves into the soft, depthless dark where sleep waits, patient and welcoming. You drift. The river does the rest. The river outside your story self keeps flowing too, but here in this quiet room where you are listening, everything can become very simple. You are not in a canoe anymore. You are just in your own body, in your own space, feeling the slow weight of the day finally agree to settle. Muscles that have been pretending to be fine start to loosen, maybe one by one, maybe all at once, like knots in a rope, deciding they have done enough. You do not need a paddle now. The only current you follow is your own breathing. When you breathe in, imagine the air arriving as gently as mist, rising from the water's surface, cool and patient, filling your chest without hurry. When you breathe out, let it move away like the river sliding past the posts of the jetty, smooth and continuous, taking a little more tension with it each time. In, soft and easy. Out, long and quiet. If thoughts still bob around like little pieces of driftwood, you do not have to chase or wrestle them. You can watch them appear. Notice their shapes, and then let them float downstream, shrinking into the distance on their own. You have done your upstream paddling for today. There is nothing left you need to push against. Any list, any worry, any unfinished task can wait on its own sandbank until tomorrow. Picture, if you like, that same hammock from the story, but now it belongs completely to you. Imagine the fabric holding you, the night air just the right temperature, the sound of some faraway river turning into the background hum of your fan, your city, your home. The edges of the room soften, corners blur. The distance between you and sleep grows shorter with every slow, steady breath. You do not have to try to fall asleep. You only have to allow yourself to be carried. Let your thoughts grow a little slower, your body a little heavier, your eyelids a little lazier. Somewhere just ahead, the water widens into a still, sheltered pool where you can drift without effort, where nothing asks anything of you except that you rest and rest and rest. When you are ready, you can let go of the story completely and sink into that quiet, trusting that the river of your own body will keep breathing for you, that morning will arrive when it is time, and that for now, all upstream journeys are paused. Only softness, only darkness, only calm. End of story. Sweet dreams.